Hello and welcome back to another Cards and Cardboard review. If you've been watching our channel, you'll know that I reviewed a game not too long ago called Sylveon, one of the Z-Man Games Oni-verse games. Well, today I'm here to bring you another game in the Oni-verse line, Castellion, or Castellion. It's spelled a little awkwardly, and it sounds actually very similar to a Steve Jackson game, but I assure you this is totally different than that, and is a very unique one or two player experience that is not to be missed. So we're going to kind of take you into the box and give you some of my final thoughts later on. Definitely, spoiler alert, take a look at this. Okay, so as I said about Sylveon, this is actually a tile game. So when you actually get into your box, you'll have your typical reveal here of the rulebook via these nice foldable inserts here. Once you are done reading the rulebook, you'll kind of understand what all these tiles are used for, as well as these cards. So one thing to note is this game has you shuffling and dealing with tiles of various types, not necessarily sizes. So you're going to want to maybe invest in a bag or something to put your tiles in. It's kind of one of my minor gripes of the game. So far, I've played through all the different rules of the game, so I can definitely attest that pulling your tiles from a bag is just a bit more natural than shuffling them up and trying to make little decks of them. So anyways, you're going to have a number of these tiles. You're going to want to leave a certain amount of these actually out of the game. To start with, anything with a blue back is very important. There are 12 of these that you're going to have to put to one side. The rest should be this red back or this kind of pink back, and that's going to be what you're going to actually play with through the game. Now also listed are these little purple ones, and these are for the added complexity expansion of the game called food stores. So when you're building up your castle, you'll have a little food store hidden away for each of the issues that are going to pop up during the game. So in typical Oni-verse fashion, we have a little molded plastic bad guy that is part of several little expansions for the book to make things either easier or harder. We have a champion of the Castellion card, which is used only in two-player games, a few reference cards, and then the various Ordeal cards. Now these are actually tiered into three different styles. You have your beginning complexity, which is going to teach you how to actually kind of play the game. Then you've got your moderate complexity one, which is going to teach you how to use some of the special abilities. And then finally the full game mode, which is going to have you utilize all of the abilities that you've learned through the game. Now you're probably wondering what I mean by abilities. Now these are obviously tiles and not cards. So one thing that comes up all the time is the fact that when you're building your castle, you're going to have to deal with how things are placed. So, to give you a little example, you're going to be playing in a 6x6 grid, and any tiles you draw from the bag or from your blue safe pile will be put onto your foundation or on top of that foundation. Now, I say foundation because that's just basically the intro line of various pieces that will be put onto the board. So your first tile will kind of dictate your first level of the foundation. Now you're going to have to follow so many rules of the game, which is also seen on the back of your reference cards here, in which whenever you draw a tile from the bag, you have to place a tile adjacent to anything that is inside of your 6x6 grid. And you're going to have to make sure it's adjacent to any tile that already exists in that grid. Now, what you can do is anything that is not the same shape as anything adjacent to it, you can actually place. In this case, I'm going to put a circle on top of a square. And finally, there is the fact that I need a square now. I apologize. To put on top of this triangle because it is also adjacent to a circle. And that's how you're going to start kind of building up your castle. Now, the whole goal of this game is to kind of build different unique formations using these various building rules, such as building a tower of all of one color. So if I get somehow all of these red jugglers on top of a piece together, they now are a tower. If I put them into a line, they are a wall. And if I put them on two on top of each other, making a square, that is called a bastion. Now, as you'll notice, many of the Ordeal cards have a number needed in order to beat them. So in this case, I need 5 bastions by the time I pull out 2 of the little trader tiles. Now, these trader tiles are unique because they're shuffled in with the rest of your tiles. And for the basic game, they're going to be kind of a pain because they don't teach you how to deal with them at that point. You're just going to be kind of relying on your ability to build a decent castle by the time you draw 5 of these. But in the intermediate game and then the advanced game, or the true game, you can actually discard one of these and ignore it by destroying 4 tiles from your castle. And what's really interesting to note is when you have no tiles in your castle, or less than 4, you can actually just discard this, whatever tiles you have, and ignore it. So if you pull one of these first off, you're not really getting yourself screwed over there. Now, basically, you're going to be going through and trying to face these ordeals before the timers come up. There's a certain number of these black tile traders, and these guys cannot be discarded. So there are 3 of those out of 12 of these unique trader tiles. And that's going to really help you kind of know that you're going to have to face at least 2 ordeals in the game pretty averagely. The rest of the time, whenever you build a full castle, you will have to face the ordeal. And if you ever run out of tiles, you're going to pretty much run the clock out and face the next ordeals that you have not dealt with yet. So that's not necessarily a good thing. So just like in Sylveon, you know, the more cards you run out of, the less options you have. So going back to this example here, say we have these tiles kind of set up here, and I want to add yet another Pyro, or Juggler in this case. When I actually add to a defensive formation any other tile of the same type, it actually breaks that formation. So it's forcing you to kind of play other tiles in between things so that you may then kind of start building up your tiles again and have a little bit more uniqueness in your castle, and therefore make a organized structure. So as I said, there are 3 different shapes that you got to worry about: the circle, the square, and the triangle. Now, those are just the placement rules via the normal game. Anytime you draw a tile and you don't want to actually utilize it, you can discard it for a special ability. This is used in the advanced game and in the full game, not the beginner mode. So based on the color of the tile, you will get a unique ability. The red guys, the little fire-like guys here, which they're not fire because these guys are actually Pyro is the fire guys, but ignore that for now. These guys, when you discard them, you actually get to ignore the adjacency rules a little bit and switch the position of any 2 tiles inside your castle. Now you're thinking probably, okay, well, how's that really going to help me? Well, if you put in a bunch of tiles into your castle, you're going to have a lot of kind of like leftovers that you're going to have to worry about, but you can also start, say, moving them around and actually putting them into a decent worthwhile position. So in this case, I'm moving some greens around to attempt to build a wall. Now, the next one is actually these green ones. These green ones are unique because anything in your discard pile that matches their shape, you can discard one of these and pretty much reclaim one of the tiles that you just you have discarded in the game. And what that allows you to do is use even more special abilities or put it back into your Castellion. Finally, we're getting up to the last 2 types here. You got the blue guys, the Seers. These guys actually allow you to discard them, draw 4 tiles randomly from your bag, and you get to play these in any order you like. So in this case, I've got 2 of these traders and I've got 2 of these chameleons. As I said before, you can also remove 4 tiles from your Castellion to remove traders, and that is part of the strategy of the game. So the only problem is when you deal with these, you can draw from your safe pile or your normal pile, and you have to play those before you do any other things. But your last one can be another one of these blue guys to get even more tiles after the fact. You're always going to have only 4 out, though. But you can also start discarding those for their special abilities. Now the last one is the most interesting. This guy is the Pyro. He actually allows you to destroy one tile and then move any tile that is on the top layer to anywhere else that can be placed. So say for some reason I've got, a really bad setup here and I want to kind of deal with some of these tiles here to maybe make a better formation for myself. I discard the Pyro tile. I choose to say destroy this blue one here. Now I shift the formation downward, back down towards the foundation, and then I take the top tile of any of my choosing, and I move it anywhere I can legally place it on top. It's kind of a great strategy to move some tiles around your castle and as well get rid of some of the older structures that you built in your castle that you don't necessarily need anymore. Now, negative defensive structures that have an extra tile aren't going to count against you, but they can kind of hinder your castle growth, and it's going to be something that you're going to want to avoid. Likewise, another thing that you're going to want to avoid is what I call keystoning, which is actually a situation where you manage to build a situation where you have a triangle, a square, and a circle all in the same place, therefore rendering any other tile placement in that area pretty much useless. So, ultimately, as I said before in the intro, the ultimate goal is to get through the 3 ordeals here and start with the level 1s and level 2s and then finally the level 3. If you manage to succeed in that, when facing the ordeal, you have to have at least a foundation in order to consider yourself winning. If then you manage to survive after the ordeal and destroy any number of tiles you need to, that's where you're going to find out if you win or lose. Otherwise, you keep going until you run out of tiles in your bag. Then you'll face the final ordeals, and if you succeed in those, you actually win. So, kind of going into things a little early here, you have the 3 different game modes, which I want to explain a bit more. So, the intro game is pretty much just the basic game where you're learning how to play, where you're drawing tiles, making foundations, and you can't really do anything other than discard a tile without any effect and build your castle. You can't even really do any destroying of your castle at that action too, so it's a little challenging. The intro, or the advanced game, or the semi-hard game, basically you can start destroying things within your castle, dealing with various effects that are coming towards you, but you always have to have that foundation for all of these in order to consider to win. And in the intro game, you actually have to meet the foundation or the requirements of the card. In this one, you have a bit more leeway. You still have to meet the requirements, but you're allowed to destroy things, as well as discard tokens for their special abilities. Now, in the full game, actually, you don't lose outright if you just don't have the foundation or formations you need. In fact, what actually happens is you're going to have these hidden from you at first, and then revealed over time, or if you use some special ability, which I'm going to get into after I explain what happens after this. So when you fail an ordeal, you're actually going to destroy a number of tiles from your castle. Well, in this case, it says 42, which, if you know your math, means an entire castle worth of tiles. Well, here's where things get interesting with the building rules. So in the full game, you're allowed to build these defensive structures. And if you have these defensive structures in your castle, you actually get a benefit. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the tower. The tower is a very powerful formation in the full game because it allows you to actually flip over the card, or any card coming ordeals, and know what they are. So therefore you can start preparing and building your formations. The next one is a Bastion, which the Bastion allows you to basically remove 4 from the number of penalized tiles that you'll actually have to be hit with. So whenever you have to destroy tiles for failing an ordeal, you'll actually destroy 4 less for each of these bastions you have in there. Then finally is the very powerful wall. Now, if you have a wall or a multitude of walls, basically what it does is it says that is 1 less tile you have to destroy in order to remove one of these traitors from the game, and therefore not deal with it. So it's a nice little discount that you can build up. So In this case, if you got 2 of them, I'm only having to get rid of 2 tiles to deal with this. And I bought myself a little bit more time. So the other parts of the game are pretty simple. There's a few advanced rules dealing with this little menace, as it's called in this game. The first game had the Incubus, the Sylveon game had the Ravage, and now we have the Menace. Depending on how you play the game, it'll make the game either easier or harder for you. In the basic game, it kind of gives you an option to switch out tiles, and in the harder game mode, it kind of, again, just gives you an ability to do a few more objectives. In the medium weight game, you have to kind of build a cage around this guy, following the same placement rules with any other tile, and once they're kind of done, you actually are not allowed to like take these out of the game and reuse them. And the only way you'll actually win the game is if you actually succeed in building the cage around him, as well as succeed at building your Castellion. And then for the final ordeal, oh boy, that's kind of a thing of its own, especially when mixed in with these food storage tokens, which make the game that much harder. So there's a lot of replayability in here, and we'll get into that in the final thoughts. So I think I'm going to go ahead and stop here and take you right into those. Okay, so getting into the final thoughts of what I feel about Castellion, I have to compare it to Sylveon a little bit, just because of the nature of the game. I play a few solo games like Friday, as I already have on the channel as well. So we're going to kind of go into the various stages of this game and break it down for you. Now, first impressions are with artwork. Artwork in this game is, of course, phenomenal. It's got this brilliant style. Everything feels nice and robust, and the graphic design works out really well. And if you're red-green colorblind, you have no problem here if you are looking at the actual creatures on the tiles. So that being said, everything is able to be understood well, and as far as any graphic design that is actually in the game on top of the presentation, this thing is rated fairly highly for me. Again, like Sylveon, I'm going to have to give this a pretty high score, about a 9. The only reason why I give it a little bit of a downside is because of the fact that the purple and red tiles are a little bit different in the back, not quite enough, and actually because you can kind of see which tiles they are, I almost wonder why the storage food expansion came with another track. So, moving on. Component quality. These tiles are actually really well cut. You're not going to have to clip them at all or deal with any square edges. So one of the issues I had was with this game, you're going to probably want a drawstring bag. And that's where the components kind of fail in that, because it didn't actually come with one. I'm not really one to shuffle a lot of tiles often, and honestly, with games like Hanafuda and Mahjong, it's really hard to kind of do it accurately without, spilling them over or, rubbing them up against each other more than you need to. Of course, you're going to have a little rub in the bag, but it's also not that bad. So I'm not sure how long the components are going to last in this, but it is really nice, sturdy cardboard, and is very well printed. The cards themselves are ultimately not that in need of sleeves, since you don't necessarily shuffle them that often. So overall component quality with the insert and everything, the presentation, the box quality, it's all really robust and firm, and this game is probably going to last you quite a long time. So we're going to give component quality an 8. The only reason, again, for knocking that down is the fact that this game kind of needs that drawstring bag or something to shuffle your tiles a little bit more, and it would have been a bit of a challenge to make those square cards maybe, and ultimately I like tile placement a little bit more because it eats up less table real estate, so that's where I'm kind of standing with that. So that brings me down to mechanics. If you told me at first through the few plays I had, I would say the mechanics feel a lot luck-based, and like many solo games, it's more of a challenge that is artificially made based on the luck. But after a few plays of this, especially in the advanced difficulty, or the true game rather, there is a lot of significant choices in this game. Much like Friday, you're going to feel kind of bad if you don't let some tokens go rather than using them to build your castle. There's a lot of strategy in here, whether you're going to build your castle up for just building it up's sake, and then using juggler pieces to move them around to where you need them to go. Choosing maybe to let a bunch of tiles go into the discard so that you can use those chameleon tiles and really utilize them to place tiles where you want or use the abilities you need at that time. The Pyro and actually dealing with some of the ordeals allow you to basically destroy parts of your castle that might be old and not necessarily needed anymore. So that's a great strategy to kind of keep you in that idea that this is a shape-shifting castle trying to face off this evil shape-changing beast. So thematically that works really well for me, and it's very strong in that sense. Sylveon also had an approach like this where it was, again, trying to save this forest from these evil flames and fires that were coming to burn your home down. So this is another one of these great little kind of defense-y style games, and honestly, I cannot wait to see what else comes out in this Oni-verse line because of the fact that they stick with the theme, that they blend it with the mechanics fairly well. Replay factor. Now, here's the part where I'm a little stunted because Sylveon had a few expansions that came with the game, and they were very much just kind of extra cards that you could get or were actually in the box, and they give you a lot of options to kind of play around with. Not to mention the whole deck building element of Sylveon had the uniqueness on choosing different strategies. Now, for Castellion, you kind of have something like that. And if you utilize the Menace token, you have a little bit more options for increasing the difficulty or decreasing it. However, it would have been nice to maybe see a bit more variety in there besides the storage, the food storage tiles, which basically are only colorless things that cannot be destroyed in your castle. And if they do get destroyed, you lose. So they're kind of a weird risk-taking element, almost like a push your luck. As you progress through these things, and you need to start off with 2 after the first ordeal, 3 after, or 4 after the second ordeal, and all 6 in your castle by the time you finish the last one. So again, it's a different way of kind of making it harder, but not necessarily changing up the gameplay much. So if you're a solo gamer and you play a game for maybe 30 times in a row, this might get a little repetitive and a little samey after a while. But if you pull it out or you have multiple options for solo games, this is probably still going to stay in your collection, and it's going to do very well for that. So replay factor, I got to give probably a 7. Honestly, I would give it higher if it had maybe a few more tiles that you could play with, or maybe some weird starting formations, or maybe more ordeal cards to come out. As is typical of these Oni-verse games, I guess there's probably going to be some sort of promotional tiles that you can probably get. So hopefully with that we might see a little bit more difference in the replay factor, and maybe have a weird little grid placement kind of strategies besides what comes in the advanced game for building towers, bastions, and walls. So final thoughts here. Overall rating, I'm going to give this a 7, probably leaning more towards the 8. And that's mainly because a replay factor is really huge for me in a game like this. I played Friday a lot. I played Sylveon quite a bit as well. Castellion, as an Oni-verse game compared to Sylveon, is not quite as robust. It has its own kind of niftiness in its abstract theme, and the fact that it's very much a game that plays well with one player as well as 2 players. However, my issue with the 2-player game is basically it's kind of a my turn, your turn for the tower defense, where basically the champion card is given off to the player who currently defeated the first ordeal, which means that the second person has to jump up, or you're going to have to destroy a huge number of tiles from, I think, one or both castles to make sure that the other guy faces the ordeal yet again. So that's kind of an interesting way to force the co-op mode on there. But then again, it's also got its own little unique quirks there that make it a good 2-player game as well. And in fact, I actually would almost prefer this as a 2-player game as opposed to Sylveon because of the fact that I don't feel like there's really closed information like what's in your hand. This is all out on the table and is something that you can kind of talk and negotiate about. Now, that being said, I love the idea that they put in the blue tiles, the safe tiles, because those are a great way of allowing people to change the difficulty up and maybe do some sort of high score challenge where they use less and less of these tiles and take more and more risk building their castle. So, that in mind, I've been really happy to pick this game up so soon. It should be hitting everywhere already. It's retailing for about 25 bucks. I heavily recommend playing this. It's a great airplane game. Mind you, you might need a bit more space. If you can, I'd almost just maybe having a little area on your table set out for it with a playmat and playing on top of that, because it's nice to kind of have this thematic way of saying, okay, this is my castle, this is how I'm building it this game. And hopefully within next week, we'll take a look at the first Oni-verse game that I just got and check out this Onirim game. And we'll complete the Onirim or Oni-verse trilogy as it is now before any more come out. So if any more do come out, you'll expect me to probably review those as well. Until then, this has been a Card and Cardboards review. Thanking you so much for watching our videos. Again, any comments or feedback or support that you can send our way is great. We love to hear this. We want to engage with the community more. We're going to be bringing you as many reviews as we can here after the holidays. Probably eat through my collection and get ready for a few more things coming down the pipeline. If you want to hear what's coming down or vote on something, just post in the comments below. In any case, have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much for watching.